Clearance is a premium on projects like this. One thing that I had mentioned previously that actually turned out okay was the radiator. If you guys remember, I put that S13 radiator in here because it didn't clear the AC compressor, but ever since getting that 1GR compressor with the stock radiator, I have just enough room to run a tight 90. So I actually don't need to do a custom radiator. One thing I haven't negated the need for is more clearance next to the oil pan. I'd like to run a 2.5-inch exhaust the whole way back. This is a 2.5-inch pipe, and there's just no chance that's fitting in there and not hitting everything. So I didn't really want to modify this guy, but I have room under the oil pan to modify it. So let's take that off real quick. Alright, so now with the pan off, you can see there would be plenty of clearance since I cut this section down. Now, another thing that'll be a problem is the transfer case right here. It's lovely. Yeah, the transfer case. So I think if I get one of these and I kind of shave it all the way around here, I could run this and tuck that in right there. Give it another 90 to turn up there. Yeah, that should do it. It'll be really tight, but it should be doable. And I need to smash in this section, then the back section a little bit. So I have a brand new oil pan to mess with. You know, the old one was pretty beat up from shipping or whatever, which they usually are. These are about usually $10 or something, so it's worth it to just get a new one in my opinion. So the areas we need to massage are here, this whole wall, and then this back side. Okay. Well, instead I decided it was easier to grind this back some. I removed this nut here, which allows for just the smallest amount of clearance there for that exhaust. But there is clearance. And then as for the back end, instead of hammering the oil pan down, I ground 2 spots off of the transfer case, which will allow that to turn, and then I'll be able to turn off to the back from there. So we'll throw the new one on, see how it fits. If it's good, then we'll RTV it in place. Well, right now I'm going to fill up the transmission for 2 reasons. 1, to check for leaks, and 2, to make sure I even have enough, because I think I have enough on hand, but if not, I need to order some, so I'd rather get that done ahead of time. So the easiest way to fill these, MR2, RAV4, Camry, whatever, take out the breather plug, stick your funnel in there, and just fill it from there. Make sure to take out the drain plug on the front and just watch it till it comes out. And of course, best stuff for the RAV4 is the Redline 75 W90 NS. Alright, so wiring wise, everything is hooked up inside the car in terms of this harness. As for the small plug on the ECU, I just made this guy right here. This plugs into the stock RAV4 harness, and this obviously plugs into the ECU and the drive-by-wire pedal. I made these brackets for the ECU just out of some galvanized bar stock. This is where this is going to mount here. I don't have screws for that, so I'm just using zip ties for the moment. So let's go ahead and get it installed in the car. Now with that wiring all done, this has, I believe, the bare minimum to actually turn on. So I need to connect the alternator post and the fuse box connector. At that point, I can try cranking it. Well, that's step one of moving this thing. Oh my gosh, it's gonna sound so good. I had to do incredibly minimal troubleshooting to get this going. Turns out when I was messing with some connectors before, I managed to unplug something. This applied power to a couple places, and I never plugged it back in, and that was just one of the problems. The other one was I didn't have an ignition switch wired up. Fixed that, and it pretty much fired up like first time. Once everything was connected properly, it just went. And hopefully that bodes well for reliability on this swap. So after having a couple days of getting off that high and copious amounts of celebration, I verified that my wiring works. So I just have to loom it, which of course means it's time to work on the exhaust. And just a recap for those who missed it earlier, this is just a Megan exhaust eBay header that fits a TC2, and it just so happens to fit pretty well in this car. I cut the flange off and welded on a V-band, and in testing it on the motor, I noticed the flange was very warped. My belt sander isn't quite large enough to do this flange, so I found a guy in Phoenix that makes turbo headers, and he had a belt sander large enough. But now that it's nice and flat, let's throw it on the engine. Oh, and those plugs that flew off during the test fire, I could only find 3. The last one was actually in my neighbor's front yard. And they all broke. So, being brand new, this has some compression. Hey Paul, look what I can do. Look at that, I don't have to remove the alternator. No, I won't elaborate. Clearly fits on the motor a lot better than it did before. It used to actually rock on the flange because of how warped it was. But now that it's nice and flat, fits good. I of course don't have a gasket on there, but I also have copper nuts to throw on here. I've heard those help, so I'm gonna do it. Here's kind of what I've come up with for the exhaust. Let's move this light. So, straight from the header, down here, runs right between the oil pan and the subframe, back and up over the transfer case from there. So, holy crap, this is tight. I ended up having to notch this pitch weld here, so I'll have to stitch weld this area. It would actually fit with that in place, but I wouldn't have been able to get it in or out. Which is, you know, kind of important. So I'll take it out and show you what I got. So this is the main tube for this, the B pipe, whatever you want to call it. This is just the last piece of that puzzle. So it is a fairly long unsupported length, so I will have to brace it in a couple spots. This ends right by the end of the transfer case, and there's some unused bolt holes right there, which will be perfect. And I may brace it a couple of spots in the middle as well, just to prevent, you know, cracking and stuff. This is also, immediately after this, I'm going to install catalytic converters, because it's just irresponsible not to, honestly. So I'll continue with that. But this is where I wanted to end. The rest will be happening later. The rest should be pretty easy. This was just a very complex piece. So I just need to finish weld this, and I'll be good to go. All right, now that I have some semblance of exhaust run on the car, there are only two things I have left on the engine wiring harness before I can pull it out and tidy it up for the last time. And that is supplying MAF power and ground, extending the MAF sensor wire up here. So I do not have room on the interior fuse box for both power sources, but on the engine bay fuse box I have 2 empty fuse locations which I can utilize, and I also have 2 empty pins on this connector. So hopefully I should just be able to add those 2 pins and 2 power sources, ignition switch to power sources, and that should be fine. The reason both of those things are issues right now is because they normally live right near the ECU, so they're currently inside the car. I need to pull them out to extend them out here. So it's really annoying, but I'm still dealing with radiators. Originally I was going to use the stock one again, but a couple issues with that. I ended up having a clearance problem with the coolant hose down at the bottom. It would run into the AC compressor still. The other problem is this size here is huge. I found this hose which is perfect. It literally went right on there and plugged right into the stock radiator. But on the stock rad, the outlet here is absolutely minuscule. So it was a huge, and deciding to go with an aluminum again so that I could just put the outlets wherever I want. This is actually out of a Salica GT4. I got this idea from Dylan Kovacs. He has a 3S GTE RAV4. This is out of a SC205. He modified his to make it work. He made a custom upper support. I'm gonna aim to not do that, and was able to cool a turbo engine with the AC on full blast. So this should be more than plenty for this engine. So I finally have a radiator that fits in place and I can connect the hoses to without running into anything, which is lovely. This was a pain in the ass. This radiator was from SC205 GT4, and I had to move both outlets, but this was what I could get that would fit here, and it was made out of aluminum that I could actually close the hood and whatever. So this is what I used. This would actually ended up being a combination of 3 radiators and some spare aluminum to make this. Just go over real quick. So the stock GT4 outlet was right here, and in fact I probably could have used that, but I would have to cut into this, which is really close to this, right where the cable drive is for that. So I don't want to do that. I moved it over here, which is where the stock RAV4 had it. Issue with that is this guy is the shape that it originally was, which is much too small to put a pipe there. So I welded on some angle aluminum just in a couple spots to rebox this off, put a new piece on there. The bottom, same kind of thing. Originally the outlet's over here, hits the AC, and I moved it to right there. And that will be able to connect to the thermostat without hitting anything and without getting too close to the exhaust. Then it's just a matter of cutting off all of the threaded holes to mount the Celica fans and capping the old lines. So it's not beautiful. The big thing I learned from this is that I'm not very good at welding aluminum. I just don't have a whole lot of practice with it. But it passed the pressure test, so I'm okay with that. I may redo this again in the future. If I do, I'll try making a new core support and only moving the bottom outlet, not the top one, because that is what took so long. So at this point, I just need to get a new hose for that and a new steering shaft, and it's ready to drive. I don't have a muffler or anything on it past the subframe, but that's not necessary per se to drive the car, at least. So this is, I think, one of the longest videos I've made, but there was a lot of updates going on here. So now that it's all done, first drive should be as soon as next episode. And before I get there, I just need to clean up all around here because everything is just an absolute mess. So good fun stuff. That I don't need to record.